So apparently Traveling Israel did a video about Hasan. I think Hasan spoke about Traveling Israel really, really early on in the conflict. He never made a video about him before. He actually did one on me before, Hasan. But I guess he's responded. Hasan, have you made a video about me? Free Palestine, no thanks. Okay. Ooh, okay. Let's go.
Because it is way too long.
Ha!
Hasan Abi made a video about me.
Oh no.
It is actually an almost 2-hour-long video that argues against me and the issues I explain in my video, Free Palestine, No Thanks. He is joined by a historian called Zachary Foster.
Yep.
The video was actually made a few months ago, and a large number of my followers have sent it to me. Anyway, the points he raised against me are still relevant today.
Okay.
I won't be showing it all because it is way too long, but I will share a link here below so you can watch the whole thing if you want to. I have no problem with people saying I'm wrong.
Yeah.
However, I do have a problem with people calling me a racist and saying that I have been dehumanizing other people. So I will start with that.
Doesn't this guy, hang on. I feel like the problem is that there's not much delineation or any efforts to delineate made. When he makes videos like this, hang on, where's the one when he says we should listen to Palestinians, and it's actually bait for him just showing a bunch of clips of like Hamas supporting terrorists saying crazy shit? Was it calling them the world's most privileged refugees? As if what do you think like refugees in Lebanon are privileged? They live in slums. He does this video
There's a war going on. And one of the most challenging things we need to do is listen. Although it is hard, we must listen to the other side. In our case, we, the Israelis, must listen to the Palestinians. Let's start with the women. The female voice is not heard enough in the Middle East. What do Palestinian women have to say? What do Palestinian mothers have to say?
Like, it's such a funny little thing, like this bait. Oh, we don't listen to the troubles of the other side. We should actually listen to the suffering of the Palestinians and to understand maybe why they got into the situation that they got into. No, let's just watch a fucking clip, probably from Memory TV, of some crazy, like, Hamas supporting woman talking about genocide and about jihad and murdering fucking Israeli civilians. Like, come on, dude. Yeah, of course people are going to call you racist because you don't make it sound as if you've given any thought ever to acknowledge any, like, substantial Palestinian suffering that might have actually been caused by Israelis to some degree. Like, you didn't even humor the idea. This is just a memory compilation. Like, yeah, okay, some Palestinians, like, have a very pro-Hamas sympathies. Quite a lot of them do, actually. Some of them are very open about their acceptance of murdering Israeli civilians. Not all of them are, though. And Traveling Israel doesn't seem to care about that. He doesn't seem to give a fuck about, or even just understanding, like, how they got into that predicament and the role that, and the sacrifices and the kind of, like, Palestinian suffering that almost had to happen for Israel to exist, even if you go back to the early evictions and the pre-Balfour Declaration. And that's just for a start. But he doesn't care about any of that. Like, it's all, like, and everything bad that Israel ever did to Palestinians is always because Palestinians did something worse earlier. That's always what, it's that reflexive instinct to just never want to concede anything. Like, yeah, he's like an expert at doing that because he's a propagandist.
He's just painting a picture that dehumanized Palestinians. This broader initiative among Zionists to dehumanize the Palestinian people. He's being incredibly bigoted towards Muslims. You know, I am deeply anti-Palestinian. I am super racist against Arabs and Muslims.
Don't call me names just because you can't prove me wrong. And because I won't comply with the rules of progressive political correctness.
Damn.
Do I make generalizations?
Yeah.
Yes, we all do. Both when we say good things about any group and when we criticize it. If I say that men are more violent than women, does that mean that all men are violent? Does it mean that I hate all men? Does it mean that there are no violent women? No, no, and no. But if 95% of men in jail all over the world are men, then you can say that men are more violent.
95% of men in jail are men. Is that a... Is he saying something about trans people? I don't know. It's misspeak. Okay.
If I say that most Muslim countries are undemocratic, or that Muslim society is a very religious society and doesn't tolerate gay people, am I wrong? Now, are all Muslims anti-democracy? And do all Muslims hate gays? No. But those who set the tone are and do. And that's why almost all Muslim countries are undemocratic.
Like,
That's
it's fine
why-
if you want to say it that way, but when you have videos saying, like, we should listen to the Palestinians, also here are 5 clips from Memory TV of just the craziest, fucking, most on-the-nose, hardline Palestinians, that's actually not representative. If you talk to Palestinians, even ones who support Hamas or sympathize with Hamas, if you actually ask them questions about their opinions on, like, death and murdering and all this shit, like, you will actually get answers that aren't quite the sensational, far-for Mickey Mouse clip that you're looking for. So, no, you do actually generalize with extreme examples. Like, you do that. Like, yeah. And it's also just the lack of acknowledgement. There's a passage from Ben Ami that's really, really good at highlighting this, especially like the Zionist right-wing tendency to have this obsession with making everything all about the 3,000 years of Jewish suffering, okay? Like Netanyahu is a massive proponent of this, right? He loves the idea of, like, it's always Jews up against the wall fighting for their survival, and that's the centerpiece. And that's fine if you want to bring that up, because obviously that's very real about Jewish history. But it's interesting that you've got, like, the Zionist narrative on that side is always, it's 3,000 years. It's like an encyclopedic knowledge of 3,000 years of Jewish suffering, but a total amnesia for 75 years of any Palestinian suffering. Like, and that's a problem. It's a problem if you actually want to eventually accept that you are going to live in Palestine, historic Palestine, Israel-Palestine, in that area with millions of people who are from that group. And you're going to have to either make peace with them in the form of separation or in the form of annexation and coexistence. You're going to have to choose between one of those things. And either of those things will involve some level of reconciliation, which it doesn't seem like propagandists like Traveling Israel, which he is, are willing to try to humor. Like, they're just not willing to offer it. Isn't that the issue on both sides? Yeah, of course it is. Yeah. Like, I'd actually argue that on the Palestinian side, it's worse because they're the ones who don't have a state. They don't feel like they can do internal critique nearly as much as Israelis can. But it doesn't mean that the Israeli right or Israelis are not guilty of it too. But yeah, of course, I think for Palestinian narratives, I think it's worse. Yeah. Okay.
Why there is a high level of violence, and that's why of the worst countries in the world in which to be gay, the vast majority of them are...
Are we not allowed to do propaganda? Only the Pallies are allowed. Daffodils. I don't think propaganda is a good thing for either side to be doing. Like, this level of it, I don't think is a good thing for anyone, because it's like an immovable object with an unstoppable force. I don't think it gets you anywhere in terms of, I think it's the opposite of what people need. Yeah. Just because I'm talking about an Israeli at this moment in time, as if I didn't spend the last 12 hours yesterday talking about a pro-Palestinian propagandist. Like, yeah.
Well, Muslim. Hasan Abi, do you disagree with me? Is what I just said dehumanizing? If so, let's set this challenge for ourselves. You have 10 times more followers than I do.
True.
How about I say to my followers, go to Jewish and Christian countries and communities, stand in the main square and say, I hate God and I'm gay and the Bible and the New Testament are total nonsense. And you tell your followers to go to Muslim countries and societies and say the same.
Hasan's going to say you should try that in deep south evangelical country as a black gay trans person. You probably would run into trouble there. It's obviously not quite as widespread as doing it in a Muslim country. I think Hasan's cope there would just be, it's because of imperialism or some shit.
I hate God, and I'm gay, and the Quran is total nonsense. I'm pretty sure that by the end of the challenge, I will have way more followers that are still alive than you will.
Jesus.
And you know that I'm right about that.
Damn.
Let's start with some history. The UN proposed the division of the land into a Jewish state and an Arab state. The Jews said yes, and the Arabs said no, and then started a war.
I have a feeling Zachary Foster's the kind of guy who's going to push back on this. He's going to say that actually they were secretly planning on doing the Nakba the entire time. Oh no. Uh-oh.
To eliminate the Jews.
Just a guess.
The morning
Maybe
after
wrong.
the partition plan, Palestinians attacked Abbas and murdered 5 Jews. This is how the war was started. They were offered a state. They said no and start murdering Jewish civilians.
Yeah, this is pure garbo. Is there even a dispute?
Oh, no.
I feel like to say that this was Arabs immediately fighting against Jews at this point out of nowhere is a lie by omission, right?
So I think they're going to hinge on the fact that the initial attack on those buses was actually a reprisal attack from a Irgun or some kind of like Jewish attack earlier. That's what it's going to be. That still doesn't stop the fact that that's when you would date the beginning of the war. Because even if you ignore that with the bus attacks, the involvement of the Irgun still came after the attacks from al-Husseini's men and the irregulars in Haifa. The Irgun did their first bombings in Haifa, but it was 4 days after irregulars were attacking Jewish communities in the same place. So you don't really win that argument, but just by mentioning the specificity of the bus attacks.
It's not like this started in 1948.
That's exactly correct. I think the basic problem with this story, again, is plucking out facts to distort history, which is to say that to pretend like that there wasn't already 20, 30 years of rejection, of resistance against Zionism, that Zionism, wasn't fundamentally a violent movement that sought to displace and depopulate the land, I think is sort of the history and the context that's being left out.
So this is just a ridiculous objection to... Okay. But yeah, that's the point. There was fighting. People realized that these two groups couldn't share the country. People realized that they could not share that country and live together as one state. They didn't want it. Even al-Husseini didn't want it. So their solution proposed by the UN was to partition the region. It was as Norman Finkelstein said, it was a pragmatic solution to a very complex problem. That's why they did that, yeah. And that's why the Jews said yes. Okay.
Here. And I think more importantly, what he does after, he basically says, and in the next minute, he says, well, you know what, like the Arabs started the war, so, it's their fault that there are 750,000 Palestinians, is a class at 750,000 Palestinian refugees. It's just a classic instance of victim blaming.
The last sentence is a good one. If you start a war to eliminate the Jews and you lose...
Where did Norman Finkelstein say that? It's his opening, I think, to the debate with Benny Morris and Stephen. Again, when it comes to solutions, Finkelstein is actually a lot more moderate than his rhetoric makes him out to be. There's a reason he doesn't talk that much anymore about one state or two states or refugees. There's a reason he doesn't talk about these things that much anymore. It's because he knows that he's cultivated an audience of maximalists who wouldn't like it that he says that.
You're not the victim. Every word I said here is true. The UN proposed the logical two-state solution. The Jews were not happy about it, but were willing to compromise and accepted it. The Arabs were not happy about it and were not willing to compromise and rejected it, and instead started to kill Jewish civilians.
And here's where I would ask Traveling Israel, you can say that, but let's not be kidding ourselves in assuming that this state, with your opinions especially with Traveling Israel's opinions on the Arabs, to think that this state would have survived with a 45% Arab minority without massive discrimination or internal conflicts and deprivation of human rights and everything else that the Zionists would have felt like they had to do to preserve this fragile, discontiguous state. Like, you would have still had a bit of a fucking mess, right? Because again, the fact is that Zionism, in order to form that state, you had a problem in that there were people who lived there that were not compatible with you, and they had to go. Like, that's how Zionism came to be. Like, it had to be that way. As Benny Morris said, transfer was inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. Like, I don't think as a Jewish state with 45% Arabs would have survived. I don't think it would have gone that way. I think the Ben Gurion idea and the Jewish agency's idea to not give them citizenship and to have disloyal people deported probably would have been what they'd followed with. That's my guess, but what would the demographic situation have been after the Holocaust people moved in? It probably would have shifted a good bit, but it still wouldn't have changed the fact that whilst that immigration is happening, and whilst that tension still exists, and whilst those borders and that security arrangement is being figured out, you've got that still substantial disloyal population that is going to be substantial in demographics for at least a few years. Yeah, I don't know. It wouldn't have been, I don't think there's any guarantee that it would have been like that much prettier than the 48 war, but In any case, had the Arabs accepted and tried to build their state within their part of the partition plan with Jerusalem as an international city, it would have made the Zionists look a lot worse for doing what they did. But yeah, I think it would have been quite Lebanon-esque. Yeah, where they have the minority, they kind of talk about a national compromise, which in brackets just means second-class citizens. Yeah.
This is how the war started. 5 Jews were killed when Arab attacked a bus from Netanya to Jerusalem on the 30th of November 1948.
Yep.
I do agree with Hasan that the Arabs didn't start being violent then. They had already
He's going to mention
started
their
to
revolt in the fucking Jerusalem riots. Oh no. Oh no. He took the bait.
attack Jews as far back as 1920. Now, I'm saying that the Arabs were violent, and Hasan Abi is saying that the Jews embarked on displacing and depopulating the Arabs. Who should you believe? Me. And here is why. As I said in the video, I can give you the names of many Jewish settlements that were destroyed by Arabs' attacks before 1947. All Hasan Abi can say is that what I'm saying is pure garbo. He can't name one Arab village that was destroyed by Jews before the Arabs started the war to eliminate.
But, Mr. Israel, you do know that there were a few thousands of tenant farmers who were evicted from their land, quite often against their will. Like, dispossession was one of the things that made the Arabs very, very angry at the time. Like, that's what he's referring to. And I don't know, I feel like it would behoove someone like this to concede the problematic elements of Zionism. I feel like it would make him a lot more convincing as a propagandist, ironically. But that's just me. Yeah.
The Jews. Come on, Hasan Abi.
Come on.
I will give you another chance. Give me the name of one village that the Jews stole or destroyed from the Arabs. After that, they go on talking about the fact that Israel didn't allow the Arabs to return to their...
The fact that he's saying stole or destroyed is so tactical because he knows people bought land from foreign landowners, and then the local tenant farmers who had no say in this were just thrown out. Like, yeah, okay. But okay. And then also largely economically excluded.
True. You don't let the people who started a war to eliminate you have another shot at doing the same thing again. But all this demonstrates the extent of their lack of understanding of that time period.
He made up a list of the destroyed villages. I think he was just talking about attacks, wasn't he? But why did he say destroyed? True. Kfar Saba, was that destroyed? These were where attacks happened. I don't think they were destroyed. Unless you count like a couple of houses being burned down, but okay.
Understanding of that time period in general. After World War II, many new states were created. Israel, East Germany, West Germany, Jordan, the two Koreas, India, Pakistan, and the borders of Eastern European countries changed too. Tens of millions of people were displaced as a result of war and new borders. 14 million Muslims and Hindus were forced to leave their homes in 1947 and 1948. Millions died in the process. About the same number of Germans had to leave the Eastern territories. And more than
Is this the quote? I think it might be this quote. If it's not, it's close enough. There's one passage in here from Ben-Ami that's so good for illustrating the problem. But here he says, an Israeli leader has yet to emerge to genuinely commiserate on, let alone admit Israel's share of responsibility for the Palestinian tragedy of dispossession and exile. Israel owes its existence to the Jews' extraordinary memory of history. It now relies on the Palestinians forgetting theirs. This compulsive ignorance of the givens of human nature greatly contributed to making the Israeli-Palestinian dispute such a desperately protracted conflict. Israel's moral abdication and her complete insouciance, okay, whatever that word is, a failure of imagination to conceive the suffering of the other, so typical otherwise of bitter national conflicts that tend always to metamorphose into a story of complete competitive victimhood, are common to both the right and the left. We, who incessantly fight for the retrieval of Jewish property confiscated by the Nazis and other executioners of the Jewish people, created through the 1950 Absentees Property Law a legal instrument to take possession of the movable and immovable property belonging to Palestinian refugees across the state. At Camp David and after, we adamantly rejected the Palestinians' demand that compensation for the refugees be drawn from such properties. This is like the irony that these groups, like was it Naharat Shimon and Shimon Hatzadik, like the people in Sheikh Jarrah who believed themselves entitled to reclaim land that they had lost from the Jordanians in the 48 war, but Palestinians asking for the same thing and having a General Assembly resolution behind it makes them the most privileged refugees on earth. I just think that's such a baffling logic to me. The fact that people are coming to me after that meeting with Nabil Al-Kurd, even though a lot of what he says I think is nonsense, like his whole conspiracy theory about why the court case went in that way, I don't believe that. I think it's bullshit. But at the end of the day, the fact that you had so many Israelis coming to me and being like, listen, that land was bought fair and square, and he's squatting on it. And I'm like, because of what? An 1895 Ottoman document. Bro, like, do you understand, like, who else makes that argument? What was his theory? His theory was that the Ottoman documents were fake, that the Jewish organization, the Mizrahi organization from the 1800s, never actually owned the land, and that there were no houses there in the entire area. It was all just olive trees, and that the only reason people believed that it was a genuine land document was because they had brainwashed the courts. Like, yeah, it's just nonsense. He just denies it existed because, unfortunately for him, is he can't see the idea that that document is real because Ottoman documents are also the foundation for the right of return as well, right? It's people with these old keys and the old documents saying, hey, I used to live in this village. Yeah, so I can see why he doesn't want to concede it, but it's, yeah. The true and base theory is that when land is exchanged like this and populations are exchanged in a war, the best thing to do is get someone settled into a state where they feel more or less comfortable and where they can have their cultural values upheld and all that as quickly and as easily as possible. Not to autistically obsess with going right back to the exact village of your grandparents or whatever was a property deed that you had over 100 years ago. Because then, you just end up in a bit of a mess. But okay, that's my position anyway.
Million Germans died while being evacuated after the war. Same story in the Balkans. None of the tens of millions of people who were forced to leave their homes between 1945 to 1949 as a result of wars and the creation of nation-states were allowed to move back. Only the Arabs of Palestine have this fantasy of return. It is an illusion, and it has been an illusion right from the start.
See, why does he say this when Israel does this in the West Bank, in properties and land that was lost in the 48 war to the Jordanians? Why does he say that? Like, that's fucking mental. Maybe he opposes it? I don't know.
The world doesn't work that way, like it or not. You can't just start a war and when it turns out that you are going to lose, instead of accepting it, you want to turn back time and get your villages back. And who is fueling all this? The UN.
Ooh.
Did you know
Queers
that the
for
UN has
Palestine.
two
I
agencies
love
for
that.
Queers for Palestine. Hamas piker interrupts parents of October 7th hostage to do on-the-ground Twitter journalism. Didn't we already watch this, or is this different?
Atlases, globes, maps, and National Geographic magazines. On October 7th,
We did
Hirsch
watch this
and his
before,
best
right?
friend Honor went to a music festival in the south
Imagine
of
not
Israel.
watching the entire stream.
It was advertised
Well, we have
as
to do it again? Okay,
celebrating
fine.
peace, love.
Bro,
let's do
that's
it.
crazy. That's crazy that the uncommitted movement, once again, making an incredibly modest proposal to have a vetted Palestinian speaker give a vetted speech, and it's always, of course, not happening. It's falling on fucking deaf ears. Ta-Nehisi quotes on the uncommitted movement. As of day 3 of the DNC, the Palestinian permission to narrate was still under consideration. The Democratic Party absolutely cannot maintain this apartheid structure in terms of like literally only having Israeli victims.
An apartheid
and they're-
structure. Okay. It's like the same energy as that campus protester calling her food delivery humanitarian aid. I don't know. Humanitarian aid, food deliveries. Sorry. Okay, yeah, I'll say it again. Why not? Why do you want this? I don't understand. If the uncommitted movement and people like Hasan and all that whole gang, the protesters, if you've spent the last year saying that Israel is Nazi Germany 2.0, that the IDF are the modern SS, that it's a genocide happening in Gaza, and that the Democratic Party are enabling and supporting it with arms, why would you want a vetted Palestinian speaker to talk at the DNC? Why would you want that? It's kind of like, again, like the supporters, these are your words, okay? You spend the year saying this is a genocidal state being supported by the United States, and you want a Palestinian, a victim of the genocidal state, to go and speak at the DNC. That's kind of like, yeah, it's like the same as someone getting upset that there's no Jewish speaker allowed to do a vetted speech at the Reichstag. If you view the world that way, that's what you get. Like, you did that. That's your fault. Yes. Shit. That's your fault. Because if any vetted Palestinian speaks at the DNC, that talk that they give is going to be everything that you hate. It's going to be two states, internal critique, condemnation of Hamas, bring the hostages back. There needs to be a ceasefire, but it needs to be bilateral, and we can never have October 7th again. Like, yeah, you would not like that speech. I don't know why. It's such a weird double thing. I don't know. Stupid.
To turn back time and get your villages back. And who is fueling all this? The UN. Did you know
Queers
that the
for
UN has
Palestine.
two
I
agencies
love
for
that.
refugees? One for hundreds of millions of refugees all over the world, and another one called UNRWA, which is only for the most privileged refugees on earth, the Palestinians.
That's. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I would point out here is that this refugee agency, UNRWA, was established in the aftermath of shortly after World War II, when the Jews faced persecution by Nazi Germany, and millions of Jews perished. And I think one of the reasons, by the way,
This is why I like the Ben Ami quote. Okay, this whole thing here. The where's the quote again? The failure of imagination to conceive the suffering of the other. If you want to make the point that permanent refugeedom, even if you get a Jordanian passport, or you live in America, or you go to Europe, like that's stupid. Okay, that's very stupid. But calling them the most privileged refugees, when you literally have like hundreds of thousands of them living in slums in fucking Lebanon and in Syria, where they can literally see the fucking bullet holes in the buildings from when people they knew or when people their parents knew were massacred by Christian militias and shit like that. Like, come on. Do you realize how much of a cunt you sound when you say the most privileged refugees? Like, you understand you sound like a cunt. Like, you're not making your point. You're not getting your point across when you talk like that. You sound like a fucking retard. You sound like a sociopath.
why the UN and the United States at the time never really said much.
Just engage with the issue. You know, actually, that the Arab position on refugees actually hurts refugees as well. Like, the fact that the Lebanese basically and the Syrians, all that these governments don't want to assimilate and give citizenship to refugees, actually, in part because they say that they still have their back and they want to keep the right of return alive. That actually hurts them as well. That fucks them over. But by calling that a privilege, it's not a privilege. You think Lebanese, like in Palestinian refugees, it's not a fucking privilege that they can't get citizenship, okay? Like, they need citizenship somewhere. They need to become equal citizens somewhere where they can actually start a family and build up a life and not be accused of normalization whilst they do it. Like, the lack of empathy is so fucking gross when people do that. Oh, God.
About the creation of the Palestinian refugees. There were even like New York Times columnists on the ground in Palestine that were reporting on what was happening, and the New York Times chose not to publish some of those articles. There was essentially, I think, owing to Holocaust guilt and owing to guilt on the part of Americans and Europeans.
And this means that the refugee status is used as a weapon against Israel. Wow, really? Is that not what I just fucking said? What it doesn't mean is that the refugees themselves, the literal fucking human beings, are privileged. Okay? This is not privilege. Okay? This is not what privilege looks like. We say the most privileged refugees. You sound like a fucking retard when you say that. That line, okay? That line needs to get fucking buried. Okay? If you're like an Israeli advocate, that line needs to go to hell. Okay? It's actually not a privilege to have your grandparents kicked out of their fucking country, of their homes. Most likely they were civilians when it happened, by Israelis, okay? And then to end up in this place, to get weaponized by the political leaders of their host countries, and by the PLO, and every other cunt, and then also to live there with no human rights, to get victims of all kinds of like scams. You know, one really popular scam in Lebanon was for people to befriend these refugees, sometimes for years, to earn their trust and basically make them feel like they have a sense of security with them, that they can that they could potentially go through these locals to buy houses. Because if you wanted to buy a house as a Palestinian refugee, you have to do it through someone else, like through a marriage or like some kind of like guarantor. But that means you have to give them your money. And sometimes these people would convince refugees in these camps to give them their life savings and then just disappear. So they're fucking broke, and then they go outside and they can still see the bullet holes in the fucking buildings from when they were attacked in the fucking civil war. Oh God. In several massacres, one of which actually the Israelis let happen because Sharon lied to his government about what the phalangists were up to and what they were thinking, lied about the number of militants in the camp, and allowed the IDF to come in there, shoot up flares, and block the exits so that the fucking phalangist nutcases could mow down between up to 1,000, 2,000 people, only to find out later that basically all of them were civilians. Gosh, golly, privileged. I'm just saying. Anyone who says they are the most privileged refugees, okay, that person is scum, okay? I'm just saying.
There was desire not to speak out against what the Zionists had done to Palestinians in 1948, and also kind of give Palestinians sort of maybe some extra special treatment in the UN. That's an argument made by Ilan Pappé recently. So, it's like, well, you're kind of leaving out a lot of important facts to the story.
What did he just say? I really admire their ability to talk without actually saying anything.
Bro, what did he say?
There was essentially, I think, owing to Holocaust guilt and owing to guilt on the part of Americans and Europeans, there was desire not to speak out against what the Zionists had done to Palestinians in 1948, and also kind of give Palestinians sort of maybe some extra special treatment in the UN. That's an argument made by Ilan Pappé recently. So, it's like, well, you're kind of leaving out a lot of important facts to the story.
What did he just say?
So Holocaust guilt means that the West gives special preference to Israel. Okay.
I really admire their ability to talk without actually saying anything. I point out that there are two refugee agencies in the UN. One for all the refugees in the world, and one called UNRWA that is only for the Palestinians. Is that true or not? It is a very simple thing to check. I will throw in an interesting fact here. The definition of a refugee, a regular, not Palestinian refugee, stays a refugee until he settles down. When it comes to the privileged Palestinian refugees, the fact is that they pass the title of refugees to their children and grandchildren. This is why there are more Palestinian refugees.
Every time he says it, bro, I hate this guy so much.
Every year. And for some reason, this definition of refugees only applies to the Palestinians. At the beginning of the video, I had talked about the long-established connection that Jews had with the land of Israel.
Ooh. Jews have always migrated, or as we say in Hebrew, gone up to the land of Israel. In the 17th
would pause
and 18th
right there,
centuries.
That's a lie. So he's fundamentally distorting Jewish history. He's trying to picture that for hundreds, if not thousands of years, Jews have always been, as he said, Jews have always migrated to the land of Israel. I mean, this is just total nonsense. Again, if he knew anything about Jewish theology, he would know that he's just spewing myths and propaganda, because for the overwhelming majority of Jewish history, it was actually forbidden for Jews to migrate to Israel. And the reason was very simple, which is that in the end of days, Jews have eschatological beliefs, just like Muslims and Christians. And the eschatological belief among Jews is that Jews should not live, let alone move to the Holy Land until God decides so. It's God's decision. Jews believe that human action to hasten the arrival of the Messiah violated Torah law, and therefore not only are you not allowed to live there, you're definitely not allowed to move there. And so he's kind of really distorting Jewish history here. It's really a grotesque distortion, I would say.
Is that necessarily true? Because my understanding was that there were always small movements of Jewish people, not like never a large number, but there were always small movements to Israel, because to some people it's not a religious move, it's like a cultural move, right? Like that's why is it next year in Jerusalem, right? I don't think it was forbidden to move there. Wasn't Jerusalem like quite a fairly large Jewish population even before Zionism? But
okay. Any Jew watching this now,
I think for Traveling Israel, this is his this is his wheelhouse. I think is the ancient Jewish history. So we'll see what he says.
Be able to believe what is being said here. Listen, Zach, we can debate how good of a Palestinian historian you are, but let me say it in the clearest terms possible.
Okay.
A Jewish historian, you are not.
For the overwhelming majority of Jewish history, it was actually forbidden for Jews to migrate to Israel.
The source that went up on Hasan's screen didn't say that. They were occasionally banned from buying land. Is he talking about pre-Ottoman? I don't know. Let's see.
What? In 1882, Jews from Yemen came up to Israel. In 1850, Jews from Morocco came up to Israel. In 1740, the followers of Baal Shem Tov came to Israel. In 1808, the followers of Hagaon Mivilna came to Israel. To Zach and all of you who don't know Jewish society, I just mentioned the main groups of Jews. the Yemenites, the Sephardic, and the two Ashkenazi groups, the Hasidic and the Prushim. All Jewish groups had migrated to the land of Israel long before modern Zionism. Harambam, Maimonides, probably the most important rabbi of the last 1,000 years, came up to Israel in the 12th century.
Are they talking about the exiles? We must be talking about like pre-700 AD. Okay, I don't know.
All Jews pray towards Jerusalem. And one of the most well-known Jewish saying is Bashana Haba'a
Next year in Jerusalem.
which means next year in Jerusalem. So,
Well done.
on what exactly...
Well done, my can I? I'm sorry. It's not even a slur. It's like a made-up word, but I'm not going to say it.
Exactly is Zach
My Jewish
basing his
friends.
claim
Okay, that's what I was gonna
that
say.
Jews were not allowed to migrate to Israel? The Three Oaths is a midrash, which means Jewish text, that says that Jews should not
It's about
rebel
reclaiming, yeah.
against the nation of the world and forcefully reclaim the land of Israel. This is one out of thousands and thousands of Jewish texts about the importance of the land of Israel to the Jews. And even this text, the Three Oaths, doesn't say, of course, that Jews are not allowed to migrate to the land of Israel. This midrash is used by a very small number of extreme ultra-Orthodox groups to justify...
Is that true? Because I don't know why you would use these guys. I can never even remember what they're called. These guys are nutters. They also, again, they want the Messiah to do the job. They still want Israel. They just don't want people to do it. They want the Messiah to do it. And they also, when it happens, Naturi Karta, and they want the Arabs to be servants of the Jews. And they latch on to progressive movements and go into their marches for fucking clout and shit. It's so funny. But I don't think it was a tiny... These guys are not the religious Zionists who originally opposed, or the religious Israelis who opposed Zionism, right? I think a lot of Orthodox Jews had issues with Zionism to begin with. That's why Zionism was a largely secular movement. But, okay. I don't think it was just these guys. There was quite a lot of them.
their objection to Zionism and the modern state of Israel, but not to living in the land of Israel. These two groups...
Like the Haredi, right? The Haredim, they are... they're very pro-state of Israel, right? And they're Orthodox as fuck, right? Yeah.
Satmer and Neturei Karta want Israel to be a religious country based on the Bible and not on Western democratic values.
True.
Some of them say that only after the Messiah comes will Israel be rebuilt. But even these tiny Jewish ultra-Orthodox groups have followers in Israel.
Yeah.
The connection between the Jews and
They're like a demographic problem. There's so many of them, and they keep breeding. It's okay to say that apparently about Jews, that they're a demographic. That's your fucking fifth column, by the way. No one ever mentions that as a fifth column. The people who want to like take all the fucking government money and not serve in the army because they're apparently keeping Israel safe by reading Torah.
The land of Israel is and always has been one of the bases.
They're forced to serve now. I know that's is that a good idea though? Now I think about it. Do you want to give guns to... I met one Haredim lady. I don't know if I want you having a gun. You're kind of mental. I know I can't pronounce that word. I've never heard it before. Fuck off. I am not an academic, okay?
Of Judaism. Zach, I will say it again so it is crystal clear.
Oh shit.
Even the smallest Jewish groups that oppose Zionism and the state of Israel...
Is he going to mention how these guys are not actually friends of the left-wing Palestine movement? Is he actually going to say that? Oh shit.
For religious reasons, have followers living in Israel.
Oh, okay.
Hasan Abi continues to claim that I don't know Jewish history because I said that the Muslims prevented the Jews from going up to the Temple Mount. And Hasan Abi claims that Jews are not allowed to go there. He actually makes it sound as if the Muslims are doing the Jews a favor by preventing them from praying at their holiest site.
So this guy's he doesn't really understand Judaism very well because most religious authorities, the most halachic authorities, it is forbidden for a Jew to go up to the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound to enter into what used to be the Temple Mount.
But it's not all the time, right? It's religiously 3 times a year. That's what it usually is. That's why they don't like Ben Gvir, because he takes people there. Like, he likes to go there a lot. Or I don't know how that works, but
Personal level, it may
But if you're a secular Jew, you just go there whenever the fuck you want, right? Do they care? But difficult because secular Jews still do religious practices, right? Like fucking secular Jews still do Shabbat. You guys, it's a stupid country, okay? I don't even know. Maybe it was a bad idea at this point. Halfway through a Traveling Israel video.
I laugh because until last October, I was going up to Temple Mount almost weekly with my tourists,
Damn.
and thousands of Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jews would be there too. But Zach is right. Orthodox Jews don't go to where that temple once stood because they don't want to step on the holiest part of the temple. By the way, thank you, Zach, for acknowledging the fundamental truth that many Muslims continue to deny, that the Jewish temple stood where the Dome of the Rock stands today. The thing is that the Temple Mount is huge, so Orthodox Jews do indeed go up there and walk around the area of the temple. Some Orthodox Jews...
Oh, this was Sharon's visit as well, because Sharon never actually went to Al-Aqsa, did he? To the fucking place that would cause the most controversy. He just went like around the area to the steps or something. Yeah.
Don't want to go at all. That is true. But those who don't want to go up are not the majority of Jews in Israel. And anyway, we're not talking about whether people want to go or not. It is about whether they have the choice. And when Muslims are banning Jews from praying on the Temple Mount, then something is fundamentally wrong. I encourage all Jews to visit Temple Mount. As a tour guide, I have a secret motive.
Oh, no.
I want everyone to visit their holiest sites. Christians, come to Israel and visit Nazareth and Jerusalem. Jews, come to Jerusalem and visit the Temple Mount. And Muslims, visit your holiest sites, Mecca and Medina. I want everyone to be able to pray freely.
Why didn't he mention Muslims going to Al-Aqsa? Why did he leave that one out? What the fuck? Was that strategic? That must have been strategic, right? That must have been strategic for him to admit the Muslims going to Al-Aqsa. Oh no.
Really at their holiest sites. That is the religious freedom that I believe in. Now that we have established that Zach doesn't know too much about Jewish history, let's talk about Palestinian history.
Why doesn't he do Muslim tours, eh?
Let's start with the name. After the Romans destroyed the temple, the Jews
You can't go to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, or Nazareth. Yeah, no, eh?
established that Zach doesn't know too much about Jewish history. Let's talk about Palestinian history. Let's start with the name. After the Romans destroyed the temple, the Jews rebelled again, and the
said
Romans
he did it
changed the
personally,
name
yeah.
of the region from Judea to Palestina, and this is how the name came to be. It was intended to disconnect the Jews from the name
That's a
Judea.
lie.
There's some contention over this, I think. Herodotus calling it Palestina, but I think the decision to make it more universal, I think, was taken at that time. But yeah.
By the way, I don't think it's worth getting into, but there's this myth among Jews that, Hadrian put down the this revolt that, remember in 135 CE, you have this revolt by Bar Kokhba, who's revered among Zionists and Jews for, resisting Roman rule. And the story, the mythology goes, he, in order to, vengefully erase, the name Judea from history, he replaced it with Palestine. I've written about this in my PhD dissertation. That's just a myth. There's no actual evidence to support that. It's basically just been propagated by Zionists and Jews for the purpose of claiming that basically even the name Palestine itself is somehow like some illegitimate name. So, but it's just total nonsense and propaganda. Even the
I think what he's going to mention is that the word did exist, Palestina, because it's obviously derivative from Philistines, who are a very old group, and that people like Herodotus, like 500 years before Bar Kokhba, were already calling the area Palestine or Palestina. But I think there was like a more official switchover under Hadrian, right? Just because some people referred to it as Palestina before that, I don't think that means that was the common term for it until afterwards, right? Is that the idea? Is that the argument?
history itself, I mean, if you actually look and dig into the sources of
He wrote his dissertation on this, and I'm just spewing Zionist myth. Let's see. He provided as evidence a section from a page in Wikipedia called Syria, Palestina. So let's open it up. Here it says, following the suppression of the Bar Kokhba revolt,
Yeah, Judea. It used to be
Jerusalem
called
was
Judea.
rebuilt as a Roman colony under the name of Ilia Capitolina, and Judea was renamed Syria, Palestina. At the top of the page, it says that the province of Syria, Palestina was established in 136.
God damn.
And that the previous name, province of Judea, was used until 132. So just to be completely clear, we have the province of Judea that existed until 132. We have the Bar Kokhba revolt, which was a huge Jewish revolt against the Romans. About 500,000 Jews died and some Roman legions were destroyed. On the page about the Bar Kokhba revolt, it says, following the failure of the Bar Kokhba revolt, the center of Jewish society shifted from Judea to Galilee. The province of Judea was renamed Syria Palestina as an intended punishment for the Jews and as a result of the desire of the region's non-Jewish inhabitants. So this is pretty much what I said, and the passage that he brought up doesn't even contradict what I said. I just like to add that the Romans didn't invent the name Palestina.
It's just that people were using it before. Yeah, okay, we know. Okay.
It was used by Greek historians such as Herodotus hundreds of years before the Romans to describe the Philistines, who are mentioned in Egyptian sources as well as in the Jewish Bible, Plishtim, who settled on the southern coastal area of the land of Israel and disappeared when the Babylonians conquered the region in the 6th century BC. But it was the Romans who destroyed...
Why is this guy soy pointing? Why is this guy doing a... What? There's no way. Oh no. That's amazing. Yeah, of course it looks like this fucking soy jack, because it is. It's a... Yeah, of course me doing it looks like him doing it, right? Yeah. It's uncanny. I was there. Okay. That's incredible. That's made me so happy. I'm such a child. I'm just an enormous child.
The name Judea and created a province named Palestina. All people have the right to identify themselves as they wish, and the Palestinians are no different. It is none of my business how they identify themselves. But you can't reinvent history. The name Palestine was decided on by the Roman Empire, and its border decided on by the British Empire. Hasan, Abi, and Zach accused me of not talking enough about 1948. So it's back to contemporary history.
To be fair, the Zionists were allowed... It took a bit of Zionist nagging to get the Negev put in there, because otherwise we were going to go to Jordan. Negging.
A paper a few years ago with Emmanuel Beshka, a colleague of mine, and we found the term Palestinian in Arabic sources something like 114 times from 1898 to 1914. So before there were any British colonizers in Palestine, Palestinians had already been calling themselves Palestinians for 2 decades, and actually if you go into Western sources and English sources and German sources and Russian sources, you actually have, the term Palestinian is being used already from the 1870s onwards. So he's just regurgitating and repeating lies that have been debunked already for years.
So Zach, I'm saying that there was no such thing as a Palestinian people, and you're saying that you found 114 instances of the Arabs of Palestine calling themselves Palestinians before 1914. So if you're right, then how do you explain the fact that the leaders of the Arabs in Palestine in the 1940s never used the term Palestinians? Isn't that strange? And you know what is also strange? That you never mentioned the names of the leaders of the Arabs in Palestine. You made
let me talk now. He's so good at the propaganda. He's so good at segueing into the things he wants to repeat and talk about. Because now he's going to go into Hajj al-Husseini, right? Did you know that the leader of the Palestinians was a Nazi who got paid by the Nazis to recruit for the SS, who are also Nazis? Fucking banger. What a segue. What a seamless fucking movement. Why does anyone care about this fucking argument about Palestinians and who called themselves Palestinians before 1940? Like, who gives a fuck, man? Why is that? What a retard. I don't even know what's wrong with your brain that these are convincing arguments. Like, what does it mean with regards to what should happen prescriptively in the year 2024? Like, oh no, we did some digging. Imagine if you do enough fucking digging through the archives and you're actually like, oh, what the fuck? Wait a minute. Wait. It turns out that in 1603, King Abdi was calling themselves Palestinian. Would that change anything to you? Because history matters. Yeah, history does matter. But not really. No, not really that much. History gives you an understanding of how we got from then to now. Okay? It does not tell you what we should do now. No, it doesn't. No. If it turned out tomorrow, Ron WW, you mincing piece of shit, that actually Palestine and that border region was actually a very strong identity that was held by most of the people living there in the 1600s, would that really change anything about what you believe should be done now? No, it fucking wouldn't. So stop. Like, would you just, if it turned out that actually from the year 1000 AD, every cunt in that area was like, I'm a Palestinian. I'm not an Ottoman, not a Syrian. I'm a Palestinian. Fuck you. And that's how they felt all the way up until the 1900s. Would that change your prescriptions on anything? Would you be like, oh, wait, turns out I actually am living on stolen land. Best get my little fucking backpack and go back to, I don't know. Like, would you really? No, nothing would change about the politics of the day. Absolutely fucking dick all would change. That fact, it's just for morons to argue with about because it sounds good, I suppose. Yeah.
An almost 2-hour-long video, and you didn't mention the leaders of the Arabs of Palestine in the most important era? Now, I think I know why you didn't mention them. Because they don't make the Arabs of Palestine look very good.
Ooh.
So the leader of the Arabs of Palestine from 1921 until the 1950s was Mufti Hajj Amin al-Hussein.
Okay, here he is.
Let's start with...
I feel like he does this in every video. He always finds a way to make it about Hajj Amin al-Husseini.
This quote: Arabs, rise as one and fight for your sacred rights. Kill the Jews wherever you find them. This pleases God, history, and religion. This saves your honor. God is with you. So the leader of the Arabs of Palestine doesn't sound very friendly. And he uses the word Arabs, not Palestinians.
Ooh.
Now, you might say this is just one quote, and they are accusing me of distorting history with facts. So, Zach and Hasan give me a quote from the leader of the Arabs in Palestine, which he talks about the Palestinians. I want to give you another quote by Amin al-Husseini. This one he had said in Berlin in 1943. Why was the leader of the Arabs of Palestine in Berlin in 1943? Because he and other Arab leaders were collaborating with the Nazis.
Ooh.
So in November 43, in a speech held in front of Muslims in Berlin...
Is this really the best picture he could... Why? Fucking Minecraft character with a little chef hat.
The Mufti said, Jews are selfish. The Jews are the enemy of Islam. They are the ones who killed the Prophet Muhammad. The Arabs, and especially the Muslims, must expel the Jews from Arab countries. This is the ultimate solution. The Prophet
I think Traveling Israel is one of those guys who will tout this idea that the Arab armies had this like united cause to expel all the Jews from the region, even though that's definitely not true. But yeah, or at least the evidence for it is not great. Hajj Amin al-Husseini, I'm pretty sure he was snubbed by a lot of the Arab League leaders, wasn't he? The other Arab leaders. One of the reasons that Jordan was okay to hold back on Israel during the 48 war wasn't just because they wanted more territory. It's also because they didn't want to be next door to a state led by al-Husseini. They thought he was a nutcase. Yeah, like they didn't want that.
Muhammad used this solution 1300 years ago. Germany never harmed the Muslims.
Bibi says that. Holocaust researchers say it's all revisionist to say no. So the true thing is that he was recruited by the Nazis, paid a salary to recruit Eastern European Muslims, mostly Bosnians, I think, or Kosovars, to join the SS. He did do that. And he also kind of liked the idea of a final solution in the Holy Land. What Netanyahu said was he took it one step further and actually said that the final solution itself was proposed to Hitler and persuaded into Hitler by al-Husseini. That an otherwise reluctant Hitler was persuaded to do the final solution by al-Husseini. That's not true. That's Netanyahu being a fucking moron. Yeah. I don't know why he said that. Like, how stupid. Why would you do that? I know because like the right-wing thing is this like where Israeli, like Jewish tragedy is the forefront of your advocacy. So yeah, it makes sense that he would want to exaggerate it. Yeah. There is a talk where the talk he's referring to is where al-Husseini is encouraging Hitler, where he's like supporting the idea of the final solution. But the problem is that meeting happened in November 41, which is like the final solution had already been ordered in the summer of 41. It was already the fucking Babin Yar massacre had already happened. So yeah.
and is fighting against our common...
That's borderline Holocaust revision? No, it is Holocaust revision. It's the definition. It's Holocaust revisionism with the purpose of furthering your own political goals. What is this? Is this just him with his bestie? He's so happy. Oh, you get a little slap on the face? It's a fan cam. Yeah, I think it's a fan cam.
enemy.
Meme review. It's all right.
The Jews. The most important thing is that they have found the final solution to the Jewish problem. These are two very interesting quotes from the biggest leader of the Arabs in Palestine, I would say. And it is not less interesting that Hasan Abi and Zach failed to mention him at all. And just while we are at it, on the important subject of the leaders of the Arabs of Palestine, the Mufti's rival was a man called Fawzi el-Kawakji. And where was he in the 1940s? In Nazi Germany, also collaborating with the Nazis. In 1947, he said, "The battle between the Arabs and the Jews is a total battle, and the only possibility is the annihilation of every Jew in Palestine and all Arab countries." So here we have two interesting facts. First, the leaders of the Arabs never called their people Palestinians.
Now again, if this guy was a bit more nuanced, he would also insist that he would remind people that when the Arab armies actually went to war, and this is what Israeli historians will say, is there's not good enough evidence to suggest that they had a plan of extermination when they invaded. It seemed to be that their war aims were diffuse, that they were disconnected, that they didn't agree with each other. And from what we can gather from their actions, it seems to be what most of them wanted was some territory and to frustrate the size and the sustainability of the Jewish state. Does he not provide sources for his quotes? No, he doesn't do that.
Always Arabs.
But you would probably put it in Google and find it's an Ivram Karsh thing. Yeah, half of them are probably out of context. The other half are probably true. I don't deny that. I don't think anyone would deny that al-Husseini, had he taken over all of Palestine, would have just happily either killed or expelled all the Jews there. Of course he would have.
Second, even before the Nakba, when the Arabs started a war to eliminate the Jews and lost it, even before that, the Arabs called for the elimination of all the Jews.
I would deny it. Let's go.
An important fact that knocks the bottom out of the narrative that uses the Nakba.
Come on, bro. They wanted to wipe out all Jews. Don't be naive. Sorry, Sabra. Like, I listen to historians. I trust high standards of evidence. You can read Benny Morris on this if you want. You can read Israeli historians on this. The idea that there was any clear plan or intention to commit a fucking genocide of all the Jews by the 5 Arab armies in the 48 War is just not true. The Jordanians obviously didn't. They wanted to just have their territory and then, do their thing with the West Bank. The Lebanese clearly didn't. They wanted to make it look like they were doing something. The Syrians, who knows? The Egyptians, they wanted to get territory. Like, I don't know. Like, the Arab Heart Committee was not the head of the pyramid in the Arab forces, okay?
To explain the origin of the Arabs' hatred towards the
It doesn't even explain why. If you're going to talk about the 48 War, it's a fact for both sides, that the Arab and the Jewish armies, compared to other armies in, like the Yugoslav wars or World War II, were actually fairly well behaved when it came to lack of war crimes. Like, yeah, they still commit crimes. There were massacres on both sides and everything, and quite a lot of them on one side. But these are not the actions of an army that's been directed to exterminate a population on either side, right? It's just not. Cope! Only for lack of power and organization, not intent. You realize that the Arab states also had international interests, okay? They had a British empire. They had European countries. They had, like, the Soviets. They had the Americans to impress as well. Like, there are a million reasons that they might not have done a fucking final solution in the Holy Land, okay? Like, stop. I don't know. Stop. It also doesn't explain is, like, when the Arab Legion and those Arab forces were in positions where they could actually massacre a bunch of Jews, most of the time they didn't. Most of the time, again, the Arab armies in the 48 War, compared to, like, the Serbs or compared to the Nazis or even the Soviets and all that, the amount of war crimes they committed in proportion to the amount of battles they fought was actually lower.
There is actually another aspect that emerged when reading about Haj Amin al-Husseini personal history. He was a religious leader. In the video, Hasan, Abi, and Zach, like all progressives, ran away from religion as if it were a fire. Zach regarding the first point I made, if the Arab leaders of Palestine never used the term Palestinians,
Most of the time they didn't. Holy shit, Lorna Box. Velvet, you were exactly the same energy. I just want you to know this. I want you to understand this. You were the exact same energy as like far leftists who will assert that there's a genocide in Gaza, and then someone will say, well, or that there's like widespread crimes against humanity or war crimes or whatever. And then other people will say, I'm sure there are some excesses, but I don't think it's like most of the military operations are criminal. And then you're like, oh, great. Most of them. That's you, okay? You are that person right now.
don't you think that when talking about them, it is more accurate to refer to them as Arabs of Palestine and not as Palestinians? I'm just a simple Zionist and you're the historian. But I think that it is important to be accurate and refer to them using the term they themselves use and not the new modern term that is used today. I could go on and maybe I will do a part 2, but one last thing in this video.
I feel like historians are not averse to calling Hajj al-Husseini like a Palestinian leader to distinguish him from other Arab leaders like Jordanians, Egyptians, Lebanese, Syrians. Okay.
Hasan Abi said a total of 16 times that I make Zionist propaganda. Every argument I bring up, he says it's Zionist propaganda, while he himself is talking about...
I'm not saying they did a genocide, no, but you are saying they all would have if they could have, which is not true. Like, again, whatever.
The biggest propaganda lie of the war, Deir Yassin. When he's talking about 1948 and the atrocities that the evil Israelis committed, he mentions Deir Yassin. And then he mentions it again. The pro-Palestinians don't have many examples, so they use the same one over and over and over again.
And over.
So, what is Deir Yassin? As I mentioned in the beginning, the first action taken by the Arabs after the UN offered the two-state solution was to attack...
Wait, are we going to see what Hasan and Foster said about Deir Yassin? He's not going to show us.
A bus traveling from Netanya to Jerusalem. The Arabs ambushed the Jews on the roads. Deir Yassin is situated on the road to Jerusalem, which was the biggest Jewish city with 100,000 Jews living there in 1948. After hundreds of Jews had been killed by Arabs on the roads, the Jews decided to move to the offensive.
Why is he still doing this retelling? Again, he's going to say that Deir Yassin as a strategic point on the road to Jerusalem was... That's not the reason they gave. The Haganah rejected that notion completely. Kastel was the main one for the road to Jerusalem. And the reasoning given by the Irgun and Lehi was because of attacks. It was because of sniper attacks. In one day, the sniper fire. And they assumed that Deir Yassin was being used as a base for other soldiers to go and fight in Kastel because a bunch of people left Deir Yassin to fight in Kastel. 12 people. And not even, most of them didn't even come back. So they weren't even there when the Zionists attack. The Haganah never, it wasn't even on their list of, it wasn't even on their list of main targets for Jerusalem. I don't know why he's still saying this.
Hasan Abi said there was a peace pact between the village of Deir Yassin.
It was a target because they were shooting? No, actually, no. They were shooting for one day, a week before the attack. That's not why they made it a target. The Haganah, after the sniper fight happened, the Haganah still did not want to make it a target. They agreed to make it a target, not because they were convinced by any Irgun or Lehi intelligence. Stop suggesting that. They were persuaded because the Irgun were going to do it anyway. And they thought it's better if they do it with our approval than if they do it unilaterally and we are a split up army, right? And it's also better than the alternative, which is shooting them for disobeying.
In the Jewish neighborhood, but Arab gangs broke it and shot at Jews. So it made sense to take over the village. This is what you do in war. Did some civilians die? Yes.
Most. Most of the people who died in Deir Yassin were civilians. Some, you fucking prick. He knows this. He knows. You don't say some when it's most, you fucking retard. I don't know.
And I've talked about it in this video. If you really want to go into the details, I will leave another video. But why did Deir Yassin become a symbol of atrocities?
Is it his response to my video in here? Oh no, it's a video just on Deir Yassin. The book that he cites, though, will mention this. The book that he cites mentions that Haganah intelligence opposed the attack on Deir Yassin, and the only reason they accepted it was for political and practical reasons. It wasn't because they were convinced that it was a valid target. The only military reasoning the Haganah possibly lent any credence to was that at one point they wanted to use the area that Deir Yassin was in as an airstrip. That's it. And even then, that was like a future maybe. So, yeah. No, it was political reasons.
Committed by the Jews. Listen to this Arab survivor.
Their loudspeakers blared out, "Lay down your arms. Run for your lives." Then I heard our machine gun. I was kneeling down like this. When I looked up, I saw the village ablaze. We gathered in Jerusalem at the Hebron gate. We checked who was missing.
The interview is real. It was only a very small minority of people who heard the loudspeaker because the speaker got stuck in a ditch outside the village. And the people approaching the village were already spotted before the speaker got there. So the speaker is basically too far away or further away than it's supposed to be. And it's also being drowned out by gunfire. But yeah, some people did hear it, like a small handful.
And who had survived. Then the Palestinian leaders arrived, including Dr. Khalidi.
I asked Dr. Khalidi how we should cover the story. He said, "We must make the most of this." So he wrote a press release.
Arab radio stations passed on the false reports, ignoring the protests of the witnesses.
We said there was no rape. He said we have to say this so the Arab armies will come to liberate Palestine from the Jews.
So Deir Yassin is a propaganda bomb that exploded in the hands of the Arabs who created it. The Arab thought that if they invented horrifying stories about the Jews, it would make the Arabs fight harder. But instead, these
Invented is a very carefully chosen word, I think. It's exaggerated, it's not invented, but okay.
fabricated stories had the opposite effect and made the Arabs run away from their villages. The thing is that people like Hasan and
Hasan
still use this propaganda today. They are still using Deir Yassin as the example of how evil their Jews are. That is it for now. I want to thank.
Why doesn't he show the video? He could, like, if you get a video of Hasan does actually believe all the fucking exaggerated stories about Deir Yassin. He believes in the dad being forced to throw his kid in the oven and then being pushed in afterwards, and the mass rapes. He believes all this. Why is Traveling Israel not even show the example? He just decided to. Oh, I guess it's the other thing. It's like, I'm just going to talk about the things I want to talk about. Okay.
My supporters. It is only thanks to you that I can keep making these videos.
Okay. Well done. God, what a dick. I don't really like anyone in that story in terms of their opinions on Israel-Palestine. Zachary Foster, this is for you. Socrates said, when the debate is lost, slander becomes the tool of the loser. The way this guy retells the Deir Yassin story is so disgusting. I hate it so much. Some civilians. Because the book that he cites will tell you that the majority of the people who died in Deir Yassin were civilians. Fuck me. And the retelling of the justification that was given for attacking it. Oh, God.